Hey guys, and welcome to my first video on Kaizen Media YouTube channel. I'm going to make this introduction video a little bit different to what you normally see on the other channels. I'm going to build an Alexa skill and not the normal to-do list or the basic CRUD type applications. This is something that will be built on Amazon Web Services and using Lambda functions. The premise of this skill is to have Alexa tell you a joke based on Chuck Norris joke structures. And I don't know if to explain that, I would say it's usually something really far-fetched and then Chuck Norris just does it better. But we are going to program this application skill to actually use your name instead of Chuck Norris's name. So to get started, some of the tools you'll need, or some of the tools I'll be using, you don't need them all definitely, is Postman, the Windows command line, and just your text editor of choice. I'll be using Microsoft Visual Studio Code, and also we'll be using Amazon Developer Console, Amazon Web Services, and this API called icndb.com. The endpoint we'll be using exactly is this one, where we can actually adjust the first and last name. Just to give you an example of what happens when we hit this endpoint, is we go to Postman, I already pasted it, we send, and we check the body. We get a response with a value and a joke, and then in that joke you get your actual joke, and then without these parameters the name would be Chuck Norris, but because we changed it to John Doe, it'll be John Doe played Kick the Keg. And that's funny because it's called Kick the Can, and yeah, you get the point. So before we actually get started, I'm just going to create a directory called Alexa, where I'll start putting in all my Alexa skills, and then I'll open that directory in Visual Studio Code. And the only thing we need to do in here is basically test our request response that we'll be using in our Alexa skills. So we won't be putting this code up anywhere because we'll be using templates, but testing your code in the integrated development environment on AWS is, to me, a little bit too much work, so I'll just do it here. And all I'll do is create an index.js, and we'll bring in a standard library. So we don't need to install npm. You are going to need Node for these tests though, but there's no need to require any packages. We'll just say const http equals require http, and that will allow us to make some http requests. So the way we'll be handling this is with a callback function, and we'll call that function http get, and we'll pass it the callback. And inside this function we are going to set some options for the request. There's an important part here that allows you to use this data. So we'll go create the options, which will be an object, and this object has a few keys. We'll define the host, and for the host we'll just use that endpoint without the HTTP, and that's api.icndb.com. And the second key will be the endpoint path that we'll be hitting. We'll call that jokes, then random. The first query parameter is always a question mark with first name as the key. So the first name, we'll just set it to something like, I'll set it to my name, Eckhart, and the second parameter, we'll pass last name, and I'll set that to my surname, Dreyer. So please don't stalk me, but those are my names. Then the method we have to define is get, and then this is an important part. Well, all of this is important, but this part I missed, so I just want to make sure you don't. We have to set JSON to true. And what this does, it allows us to parse the data that comes back in the request as JSON, because we'll have to access the value and the joke as we saw in Postman over here. And then what we'll do after that is just this doesn't do anything yet because we need to call it in the first place, but in the second place there's nothing being done inside this function. So what we'll do is we'll set a variable to request, and that's equal to http.request. We'll pass it the options, and then we'll call a callback function, and this function will take the response as an argument, and this response is what will, oops, don't need the arrow because I have said function, but this response would be what we use to handle all of this data and stuff. So we start off by saying setting the encoding, otherwise we'll get these weird values, but we set the encoding to UTF-8, nope, 8, and then after that we'll do res.on, and this, what's going on? Oh, oops. After setting the encoding, we'll set res.on, and the first parameter we'll pass here is a string called data, and then a callback function with the data as a parameter. Oops, we have to set a comma after data. Then we'll have to set this. This doesn't make sense right now why we're doing this in this manner, but I'll show you when we get to actually using this code inside of AWS. But we're going to set a constant and call it joke, and the joke will be equal to the JSON that we have to parse this data. We need the value and then the joke inside the data, but you don't do that here because that is undefined. We have to do it outside of data and say dot value and dot joke, as we saw in Postman. We'll invoke the function. First we have to say request dot end, then outside of this HTTP GET function we'll invoke HTTP GET and save. Let's pull up the command line. We'll say node, so you'll need node installed to be able to run this. Just call the file index.js, and we've got an error. Great. Oh, I didn't do the extension, so node index.js. Dope. So you see, once you go Drea, you're physically unable to go back. So they replaced Norris with my surname Drea, and we get the full joke back. Awesome. We'll take this code and we'll go into, firstly, the developer console. We'll open Alexa skill set, and while that loads, I'll go to Amazon Web Services and open up AWS Lambda. You'll have to create an account to be able to access this, but I've already done that, and I'm pretty sure you can figure out how to do that. But let's say get started. We'll create a new function. I'll leave this open for now. Firstly, we're going to set up a new skill. We'll call this skill my name jokes. Cool, how original. Next. So here we want to choose custom so that we can just design a custom skill. And then we can say create the skill. So what you want to do first is add your own intent. This allows you to create sort of questions and stuff that people ask. I'm going to say my jokes, create custom intent. And to invoke this intent is basically the utterances is what you're going to ask Alexa. So I'll say let's say tell me let's put in our name, tell me an Eckhart joke. I'm just going to put in one for now, but you can put in as many as you like so that you can ask her in different ways. After you've done your intent, you want to save your model. Don't build yet. Oh, we have to set an invocation name first before we actually set. So the invocation name is anything like keyword sort of. Here they give an example, daily horoscopes, and daily horoscopes is in there. But you cannot include stuff like tell me or ask me or load because that's not what it's supposed to do. Just say Eckhart joke. Then this should be okay. Save. Okay, model saved successfully. My jokes. That's good. Endpoint. At the endpoint section, you want to be choosing AWS Lambda, and this is an important key. For now, we don't have this key yet, but we'll get that. Let's just delete this. Okay, let's move on to the Lambda management. So we've chosen functions in the Lambda console, and we're going to use blueprints and not author them from scratch because we are lazy. But let's search for Alexa, and then we'll use this one. So what this gives us is a pre-coded skill. So I realize this isn't too much code or too much learning about JavaScript or whatever, but it's cool to see what you can use Node and JavaScript for. Okay, we'll define a function and we'll call this function name jokes. Roles are important, so we need to add a role. We'll choose an existing role, and the existing role we'll choose Lambda basic. If you don't have an existing role, go to create new role from templates. Create a new custom role. It'll take you to a different URL. You don't have to change anything. You just say allow and you'll be good. Brings you back and you have Lambda basic execution. Cool. So this is the code that it will provide for us. We don't need to do anything with this right now. We just say create function. After you've created your function, you'll see a congratulations message, and on top of here you'll find your ARN, and this is what we have to use inside of the Alexa skills kit, and we just place that inside the default region, and then you can just click save endpoints. And we get an error. Okay, so I got the error. I forgot to do something before I took this key. In Designer, I don't know why this isn't open, but you have to open it up, and this is where your region is important, because if you had Oregon or Ohio in there, it wouldn't show these two skills. Designer kits. So what you need to add is this Alexa skill kit, and this is important because you need to add this skill ID back in here. And then you can say add. You have to save your changes, and I think we're good to go. Paste and save. There we go. Skill manifest saved successfully. Cool. What that has done is it's linked up your front end Amazon skill to your back end Amazon skill. I know that sounds a little bit weird, but that's how I like to picture it in my head. Here we have our functions, our function name jokes, and this function has all of this code. To test this code, I'm going to just use these random facts that it's giving, but ideally we are going to want to replace these facts with our jokes. To test our model, we'll have to invoke our Alexa skill. And the way we invoke it is by using our invocation name. Then going to test. Once in test, sometimes this may be off. You'll have to switch it on, and to be able to switch it on, you'll have to build your skill first. And the way you build is just by either clicking on build model, or when you're in my jokes or whatever your intent name is, you can just, if this decides to load, you can just say build model up here, but I've already done that, so let's just test. On this test page, you're going to want to untick these two and paste in your invocation name, enter.
Here's your fact. Jupiter has the shortest day of all the planets.
And cool. Just to be sure that this is actually our response, we'll go back to Lambda and see Jupiter has the shortest day of all the planets. Cool. So she just chose a random fact out of all those facts. So now we're going to want to make this function our own. And if you remember, we actually defined all of these things in here. And the way I'm going to do that is just take this thing and bring it right in here. Paste it right there. We're going to have to require HTTP, which is already available, so we can just require it. We'll define our function up here, and we won't call it just yet. So for starters, we're not going to want to log joke out here. We are going to want to take this data that we get back from our response, and right before that, let's just set a variable called joke. We'll initialize it to empty. Then for this function, we'll remove the constant and just set joke equal to that response that we got and test it inside of our code. There's one more thing we're going to want to add to this function, and that'll be the end part of the function. So what we'll do is I'm just going to grab it over here because I've written it and paste it in there. And what this is saying is on end, take the callback and pass it the joke as a string, because we've passed the JSON here, and just to be sure it's a string, we just toString it right there in the parameter. Now what that allows us to do is we can use this HTTP GET function inside of, and that also we can just delete all that data because we don't really need it anymore. And we can change our skill name here to name jokes. Let's change fact to, here's one. Give it a space. Help message, you can say, tell me a name joke. And that should do it. Over here we get a few informations, but that's just code format, and if this doesn't look very nice, I'm sorry, I just want to get to the gist of what this thing does. Yeah, it's just saying it's defined, so that's fine, we'll use it soon. Just chillax. Data is not defined because we just deleted it, so we can say this will be joke, and it's not an array anymore, and it's not a fact anymore. So let's just set that as joke as well. And then we don't need this fact index. We don't need random fact, and we can change random fact to joke. We have not defined joke. Let's define joke here as a variable joke equals this on the global scope, because if you remember, we actually did define it in here, but that is only in the scope of this function, so we have to make it global. Let's just make this thing stop complaining. It's never used, don't worry, we'll use it. And then we don't have to do this anymore. We can change this name to final joke equals joke, and then just close it down. Then we'll have to use final joke over here as well. I know I'm defining all these unnecessary constants and variables and etc., but that's fine. This is not a code format video, this is just making it work. Cool, no complaints. And then we have, just to go over what is happening here, is we have these handlers and they're being exported as the Alexa's skill basically, and you get a different intent, and we'll just leave this name as get new fact intent, but this is sort of a self-defined intent, and we emit this on launch request. So we don't need to bother with this too much, because that's just how this this is taking our stuff and sending it away. But these you can define as your stop message, help prompt, help message, and get fact message is this piece. So what this is doing is our speech output is going to say get fact message, which is equal to here's one, and then we'll give it the final joke. But we don't have the final joke yet, because this function is supposed to provide it to us. So the way we get that final joke is we actually call that function, and we have to do it out of this get new fact intent, so that we put all of that code in the same execution stack. So I'm just going to grab the function and put it over here, and that's an incomplete function, so I'll just close it off, make it nice, and give it a semicolon. And the result parameter that we're passing it is the callback joke string that we are giving it from this function declaration. So the callback is being provided by that, and then we can use it as the result. We need to put all of this inside of that get request, so that everything happens within this request and not outside of the execution environment. We'll say final joke is not equal to joke anymore. We'll say it's equal to the result. And then that should give us jokes. Let's test it out. Let's see what happens. Let's save this. Okay, cool. So it's saved, and in order to test this, I'm going to change some things inside of the skill itself. I'm gonna go to invocation and say Eckhart joke, and then save this, and then go to my jokes and change these utterances to tell me an Eckhart joke. These are the things you're going to actually ask your echo, but I'll be just using the invocation name. Before you do anything else, you have to build your model with the new invocation name, etc., which will take a while. So the build has successfully completed, and that allows us to go to test. And in test mode, I just deactivate these two things, and we can ask Alexa, oops, that was a misspell.
I'm not sure.
And enter, let's see what happens. Awesome, we get it back.
Here's one. Contrary to popular belief, there is indeed enough Eckhart Dreyer to go around.
Well, let's actually see if it generates another response. It should, because we have that random parameter, but let's see.
Here's one. Eckhart Dreyer does not follow fashion trends. They follow him. But then he turns around and kicks their ass. Nobody follows Eckhart Dreyer.
Let's do another one, and we are actually testing if it's randomizing. So let's do this. Check if my speakers are loud enough, and enter.
Here's one. Eckhart Dreyer does not own a stove, oven, or microwave, because revenge is a dish best served cold.
Huh. So yeah, I guess that's basically it. This will be available on your personal Echo when I go to my Echo, because it's linked to my account, and when I go to my Echo and ask for these jokes, I actually get them back. And on the Echo, you can actually use your utterances instead of the invocation name. But I have tried using my utterances in test, but it doesn't seem to work. So just to be safe, add your invocation. And yeah, thanks for watching, guys. I hope that was a interesting video. It was my first video, so sorry if it was all over the place and not structured well, and I was speaking a little bit funny, but I hope you guys enjoyed it. Let me know if there's anything else you'd like to see, or if I can make more videos, or if I should just stop. Thank you, guys. So leave a comment, subscribe, I don't know, leave a like. Enjoy your day. Peace.